All right, so let's dive in. We are talking traffic and analytics. So at this point, we have gone in, learned how to build our avatars, how to write ads, set our campaigns up, and start running stuff. So the next thing is, how do you know what's working and what isn't? And that is where analytics comes into play. So I am excited to kind of show you guys the next step where we can figure out, when is it time to start optimizing, start scaling? When is it time to go and tweak stuff? Um, you guys probably don't need this. This is a relic from days gone by, but I love this picture of me, so I never take it out. um, anyway, I'm a full stack marketer. I created Digital Marketers Analytics and Data Mastery course, but I'm also helping out with Train My Traffic person. So you guys are already familiar with who I am. I will say the one thing that I kind of do on the side, in addition to working with Molly and Ezra, is I build automated dashboards to help businesses kind of understand how their websites are performing, how their paid traffic is performing, and just give some high-level insights into what's going on in the business. I do not think that an automated dashboard is a good replacement for good old-fashioned digging into the data, but it is nice for CEOs, company leaders to be able to do quick kind of at a glance health checks, and that is something these do. I know Tim reached out to me on Facebook Messenger, was like, hey, I'm super interested in that stuff. Are you going to cover it? I said, no, we're not going to have time. So he was really hyped and interested in it. So if people really like it, I've got a couple of videos that I've recorded kind of walking through. Maybe I'll just drop some in the Facebook group. Definitely more advanced though. So if you're just kind of getting started with this tracking stuff, don't worry too much about this. And why do I do this? Why am I here? Well, my mission is to empower marketers to think like analysts. I think that there are a lot of educators and trainers out there who are really great at getting people hyped up and excited about the ideas behind marketing and to dive in with both feet, which is awesome. I am definitely way more interested in technical implementation, in having things go well from a structural setup, thinking about how data affects it all. So I love getting to actually show people like you guys how to think like an analyst, how to make smart decisions. I'm not going to be here telling you to, spend $1,000 if the data says don't do it. My job is to say, ooh, let's pull back, let's stop and think about how we want to spend this money, because money, time, products, customers, attention, those are all finite resources. When you learn to think like an analyst and to think about what the opportunity cost might be, where people are excited, where there's growth potential, you can really be smart with the money you spend anywhere in your business, but especially with advertising where budgets can go kind of crazy. So what are we going to learn about today? We've got a few different sections we're going to cover. I always like to do the tell them what you're going to tell them and then tell them what you told them at the end. So first, a quick review of the foundations of data and analytics, just setting the stage for what we're going to talk about. We don't have to get mired down in this. I know I could do a 90-minute presentation on that myself, but that's not what you guys are here for. We're going to talk about why you should be tracking data in your business, and specifically paid traffic data. We're going to talk about how to track paid traffic data in your business. We're going to talk about
John.
what data. Yeah.
Hey, John. Hey, I just lost power again, and my phone might die. I'm tethering off of this for the Wi-Fi, so I might lose you guys, but I don't know when it's gonna come back, and I'm sorry. So my power's out and Facebook's down today. What's happening with the world? But you're an organizer, so it won't shut this off, right?
Right. So yeah, we're solid there.
Okay, well, if I'm gone, I'll talk to you as soon as I can. Sorry, guys. Have a good one.
All right.
I'll
So
be I'll be here as long as I can.
I'm Sandra Bullock in Gravity, floating off by myself. Hope things go okay. That's all right
You
with
got
me.
it. All right. Sorry to cut you off.
So yeah, so we're going to talk about the why, the how, and the what of tracking paid traffic data, and then we're going to talk about how to use that. I think this is a missing piece very often. People understand how to pull data, but then they've got a bunch of data and they're looking at it and they don't know how to make decisions with it. So I'm going to give you some tools to actually make decisions. Then we'll talk about daily routine, kind of how I think and act as an analyst. And if you're your own analyst, that's okay. This is something you can do once a week or once every other week or whatever works best for you. And then I would love to show you guys some actual data inside of Facebook. However, Facebook is down, as we all know, and have all probably been stressing about this morning. So on Monday's Q&A, I'm going to do some actual pulling data from a paid traffic campaign and putting it into the tracking sheet that I'm going to be giving you. So don't think that that's going to be something you missed out on, right? You're going to actually learn how to pull this data and put it into sort of your makeshift dashboard I'm going to give you, but we're not going to get to that today. So this is what we're going to go over today. Let's just go ahead and dive in. First, we have the foundations of data and analytics. So it's so important when you're working with data to make sure you're thinking about all the ways that things happening in your paid traffic, happening on your website are impacted. It's really easy to have some little factor change what's going on, and it can drive you to spend a lot of money in the wrong way. So I think it's really important to sort of lay this solid foundation of what it means to have a rigorous sort of plan and discipline to use data and analytics. And rigorous doesn't necessarily mean hard. It means having structure and intention and a plan around it. So what are our 3 principles, right? These are the most important things you can possibly do when you're working with data. Give your data a job. Use hypothesis testing to convert questions you have into marketing strategies. And then bringing context in to let you account for the unmeasurable. So those are the 3 principles. Let's talk about what each of them means in a little more detail. First is give your data a job. Basically, this means that we need to make sure when we're collecting data in our business, that data is going to be used to make a decision. If you're just pulling a lot of data into a database and you never look at it, you never use it, not only are you wasting opportunity in your business because you don't look at the data, but you're wasting your time because you're pulling a lot of metrics, which is usually somewhat time consuming, and then not looking at them. So we always want to make sure that we give our data a job, right? That each metric we're looking at in our business has some action that we take to make the metric look more like we want it to. You know, if your cost per lead is too high, you need to bring that down. And so there are different ways you can do that by changing your opt-in page or changing the ads you're running. We're going to get into the different jobs and actions that are tied to each metric, but you want to make sure whatever information, whatever data about your business you're looking at, you know how that's going to drive your behavior to make things better for your customers. Next is using hypothesis testing. So iterative testing is the key to optimizing with data. What this means is when we are working with data in our business, we need to make small changes all the time. Maybe it's changing our ad copy, right? Our ad copy sounded too salesy, and so we need to change it and put more of that personal story in there to increase the number of social likes and shares and comments, or get people to engage. And doing that testing is kind of the basis of using data in our business. Testing doesn't always mean spending a lot of money to, buy BWO. It's a website testing tool. It can just mean tweaking and changing your ad copy on Facebook. But what you want to do is ask yourself questions about what you're seeing and use those questions to drive how you're changing stuff. So if you see that your costs are high, you can ask yourself a question of how can I make my ads more engaging? Or you can ask questions about how do I make my website a better experience for customers? And by asking those questions about your data and looking and saying, okay, bounce rate is high, so it's a website issue, or the cost per click is really high, so it's more of an issue on the paid traffic platform. You can step by step improve the overall flow from people seeing your business on Facebook to them opting in or buying something, becoming your customer. And then the last one, and the one that I don't think a lot of people really talk about or think about, is trying to tie in context. It's so easy for us to forget that there's a world outside of our business that really affects our bottom line, that affects how our customers are living and engaging. So you need to make sure you're remembering context when you're looking at data in your business. So that would include the time of year, changes you make to your website, what's going on in your industry, things like that. I remember last December, I had a client who said, oh, okay, we ran this funnel back in August and we were getting lead costs of about $1.40. which, they felt really good about. They said, okay, we can run this funnel at a profit. But I had to remind them, hey, it's December. This is a really, really busy time of year for paid traffic platforms. So trying to use a historical data to make a decision about what you think this campaign is going to cost is not a good idea, because there's so much more inventory being bought up by big companies in preparation for Hanukkah and Christmas that your lead costs will go up at that time of year. So by drawing in information like that, thinking about what's going on outside of our individual business, we can add a lot more color and context to our data to help us actually make decisions. If you change something on your website and your performance plummets, it doesn't mean you need to delete all of your ads. The ads may still be working great. Instead, it's time to go look at your website and fix it. Or a new competitor enters the space and your costs start going up because they're stealing your customers. It means it's time to, pivot in such a way that you can sort of counterattack from them breaking into the space. So that's really important to keep that in mind. So we covered the foundations of data analytics. Let's talk about why tracking matters. Tracking is half of media buying, right? We sort of talk a lot about the creative and we talk about how to set the campaigns up, and that's all sort of the starting half, which is getting these ideas, this creative piece of it set up and running. But if you don't look at performance, once things start moving, once people are actually like clicking on your ads and engaging with them, you are not going to have a lot of success with your Facebook ads. You need to make sure you know how they're performing and what's working and what's not working, because you can use that information to improve and save more money or generate more leads or more customers. And one thing that is sad but true and very important to keep in mind is Facebook and Google are credit hogs. So a lot of people I know who work with Facebook ads, they trust implicitly the numbers that you see in Facebook's ad platform. And I am not here to rag on Facebook at all. I think it has some really, really awesome reporting in there. But Facebook and Google's job is to get you as an advertiser to spend more money. They ultimately want you to say, boy, I wish I was spending $10,000 a day instead of $5 a day on Facebook. And so they have engineered the way that they track and credit sales to be very positive for them. And it's all about this kind of attribution idea, right? So attribution means how you decide who gets credit for when a sale or lead happens. And Facebook's default setting is a attribution of a 1-day view window and a 7-day, I believe, click window. So if someone sees an ad in their newsfeed, they're just scrolling through, they don't even really stop and engage with it, and later that day they go and buy from your website, Facebook is going to take credit for that sale in the ads manager. So, what do you do about this? Well, by validating and verifying performance with a third-party source, you can both, rely on what you can from Facebook, but you can also make sure that Facebook is not over-crediting themselves with the sales. So tracking is really important, right? Because if Facebook counts everyone who sees your Facebook ads, but you run a big email campaign, your email is going to do a lot more of the heavy lifting on actually driving those sales. So you might not be able to take, what you see your cost per acquisition as and use that to project what you're going to be able to spend next week. So we want to make sure that we're trying to essentially confirm what Facebook has to say, prove that it is accurate, and then use that information. So what are the benefits of tracking? Well, you can prove your value to your clients or your boss. So if you're an agency or you're an employee, tracking is really great because it allows you to show that these strategies that you're learning in TMTP are actually working and helping you and the business you're working with make more money. So going in and showing like, hey, we used to spend $4 to acquire a lead, and now we're spending $2 to acquire a lead because I launched all these ads that got really great social proof and we get way more shares now. That's amazing. And you have data, you have numbers that can show on this day I launched these new ad creatives, and here we are a month later and our cost per lead is way down, or our cost per acquisition is down. You can optimize based on data, not guesses. A lot of business owners sort of rely on that gut instinct, right? Or they read the latest hot business book and they come up with the strategy that's going to save the company. Sometimes that works, but a lot of time it's sort of a crapshoot. But when you're looking at data in your business, when you're looking at actual information and using it to create this feedback loop where you're changing what's going on Facebook to optimize based on that information, you can spend your money more intelligently. You'll know which campaigns you should spend money on and which campaigns you need to turn off, right? Or which campaigns you need to change the targeting on, whatever it might be. And then the other big benefit of tracking is you can make performance predictable. And this goes back to what Russ touched on a little bit. Everyone was super excited and enamored when he had that back of the napkin math for his webinar funnel. And that's kind of an example of making performance predictable, right? He was able to say that his leads cost about $8.60, and he knew he wanted to get 500 leads. So he knew he needed to spend around $4,000 to get those leads for his webinar. And he knew that if he converted at 1%, then he was going to make all of his ad spend back. He was able to do all of that last Wednesday, right? So almost a full week before his webinar, because he had some data to predict what performance was going to look like. And ultimately, that's kind of what we're driving to, right? If we had to boil it down to the simplest, most basic thing, the reason behind why we track is that data gives us confidence in what we're doing in our business. It's confidence in our plans to optimize, confidence in our value as an employee or value as an agency, and confidence in predictions we make when we're looking down the road for where we want to spend money or how much we think we're going to need in our budget. So if we know why we need to track, how do we track? And this is definitely going to be the most technical piece of this section, but don't worry, I am going to obviously be on the Q&A call Monday. So if you have questions that are specific to your business after the end of this, we can answer all of those on the Q&A. But this is going to be kind of a quick, high level, we're going to go 6 inches into the river to understand how to set the tracking. So I've got kind of the different things you need to do in different places. The first place is Ads Manager, and this is something you guys are all familiar with. And the main thing we want to do in Ads Manager is set up tracking to know when people click on our ads, that when they get to our website, we can say, oh, they came from this ad, from this source, or this, this particular creative. And the way we do that is by adding UTM parameters. So this is, kind of it's a little ugly. I'll say it, but but it's a helpful way to break it down. And so a UTM parameter, UTM stands for Urchin Tracking Module, something like that. It's basically a system that Google created that a lot of people have adapted and started to use as well, that allows you to add details onto any hyperlink. So https www.coldandquill.com, right? This is Molly and I's friend and frequent collaborator, Lindsay Martyr. She works on this website. And so we have a URL. Normally when you're creating a Facebook ad, you'll put the URL in, but we're going to add some additional information so that we know when they hit our website exactly where they came from. So you want to have UTM source, and that is your referring site. So that'll tell you where the traffic came from. So that could be Facebook, or it could be Google. You could also include what email list you're mailing if you're not doing paid traffic specifically. Then we've got our referral type, so UTM medium. For Facebook, that's going to be CPC, cost per click. Sometimes I break this out into cost per click and then retargeting. That's really a choice you can make, but if you're trying to keep it simple, CPC is a good one. UTM term, this is where we'll include the audience, right? So this will help describe who you are targeting with your ads. UTM content, that tells you about the creative. It gives you information about what the ad is that you're using here, right? So maybe it's your, video ad where you show a picture of the product being used, or maybe it's your story-based ad. And then the last one is UTM campaign. And UTM campaign describes the big picture campaign that you are doing. And luckily for Facebook, it's already set up to use campaigns as its sort of basic structure. So you already are familiar with this concept, right? So if I'm running, you know, Russ's Modern Publisher webinar, that would be the campaign name I would use here. The great news is Facebook has a lot of these values that can be input dynamically into your URL to track. So you don't have to, for every single ad, go in and know what the ad name is and know what the campaign name is, because all of that information is stored in these variables. And even better news, because I know this is something that Molly and I used to actually kind of struggle with. It used to be when you created a ad in Facebook that the link, that your sort of destination URL, you'd put it in there, and if you wanted to put any tracking on it, you would not be able to reuse that same URL, because once you created the post, the URL that it links to is static and set, and every time you reuse that post, it would credit it back to the old ad campaign. But inside of Facebook now, they've got this URL parameter section, and you can find this inside of the ad. It's at the ad level in the builder in the ads manager. And essentially, you just put in this value. Oops, let me go back. Let's see, we were on this page. Cool. So you put in this string right here, and I'll post it in the group so you guys can grab this. But by putting this in, it's automatically going to pull in your source, your medium, and your ad creative, the ad name, and your campaign name. So the only thing you have to do is add this little snippet of text to the URL parameter section, and then you want to fill in your audience name, right? This is who you're targeting. So all you do every time you launch a new ad creative in a new ad set or a new campaign is just copy this string of text into the URL parameters box, and then go in and decide who the audience you're targeting is. So this one is running to warm audience, or this one is running to cold interest targeting based on whatever. But you put a little name in here. And by doing all of this, you're going to pass information to Google Analytics that will let you see where all of these Facebook visitors came from specifically, not just that they came from Facebook, but which ad specifically they came from, which campaign they came from. And that lets you get really kind of granular on how performance is looking in that third-party source like I was talking about. So that's really the big stuff you need to track inside of Ads Manager, right? To set up is the UTM parameters. And by doing that, whenever people come to our website, we know not just that they came from Facebook, we know which campaign they came from. But there's also some stuff we want to track on our site. And I'm specifically talking about Google Analytics today because it is a good, it's kind of the standard, right? There are other tools you can use to do this, but Google Analytics is the best option. It's free, it's used very widely, it's really robust. So if you aren't using any website analytics tracking tool yet, go ahead and set up Google Analytics. It's going to be your best choice. And what do we want to track here? Well, we want to track page views. So that's anytime someone looks at a page on our website. We want to track opt-ins, anytime someone gives you their email address. You want to track adds to cart, so whenever people put a product in their cart, or for an info product business when they visit a sales page, and then when they actually buy. So these are some of the most important metrics we can be tracking on our website. Page views is tracked natively in Google Analytics. As long as you have it on your site, that's going to be tracked. But these other three, we need a little bit more information in order to do that. So Google released about 5 years ago now, Google Tag Manager. It's this amazingly cool tool. It allows you to deploy little bits of JavaScript tracking onto your website based on what visitors are doing. So you can deploy normally your Google Analytics code through this, but you can also track whenever someone opts into something, or track when somebody gives you, buys a product, or when somebody adds to cart. Those are all things that you can't natively track on any website. And even if you're trying to track them with Facebook, you've got to set up custom events to track them. But Google Tag Manager is a great way to do that. So this is a really, really powerful tool. It has two basic pieces, right? There's the trigger. This essentially describes what the visitor is doing on the website. And then there's the tag. And this tells Google Tag Manager what you want it to do whenever someone takes this action. So a good example of a trigger would be a page view. Somebody on your site, views the thank you page, right? That might show you that they've made a purchase. So whenever someone views page URL contains, dash thank you, then it's time to fire off to Facebook or to Google Analytics that a purchase has happened, which allows you to say, okay, I can now say that someone actually bought something on my website. I'm not just kind of having to look at my CRM to do that. Setting up Google Tag Manager is a little complicated, but you can keep it really simple, right? If you're just looking at sales specifically, then you're going to be able to go in and set up triggers for thank you page views, and that'll get you what you need. You can get more granular. There's lots of cool resources to build a more robust tracking suite. But I think just to get started, setting up whenever someone views a thank you page is the best thing you can do to get it rolling. There is one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at web analytics, and that's there's two kind of key ways to look at what's happening. You can either look at unique page views, so that's every time someone views a page, it tracks at the person level. So somebody views the same page multiple times, it's one person. Or you can actually create events. And events are more powerful because events can carry things like how much the product a customer bought was worth, or what the specific thing they opted in was for. Page views can't store that data, but page views are a nice, easy way to get a handle on how tracking looks for your website without having to set up the more complicated stuff. So if me showing you the pictures of Google Tag Manager gave you cold sweats, don't worry. You can still use unique page views to get a lot of the useful information you need to understand what's going on your website. And then the last piece, and kind of the newest piece, is Facebook Analytics. So Facebook debuted this very recently. It was really last year that it first rolled out, and it's got some really, really cool information in it, because you can now pass to Facebook events that it knows how to track. So that's things like page views that we're already kind of familiar with. It also does opt-ins, purchases, things like that. And what's really great about the Facebook Analytics piece is not just that you can, in Facebook, see what's going on, but you can also sort of help Facebook understand your customer journey. Because Facebook not only knows when you are using their events that some action was taken that was something you wanted people to do, but they know it was a page view or an add to cart or a purchase. And Facebook understands the basic principles of the customer journey, right? So they know that having someone opt in as a lead, it happens earlier in the process than the person becoming a buyer. So they can sort of group people that are interacting with your website by the stage of the customer journey they're in by using these events. So that's kind of an incidental benefit of that. Standard events, that's what we're talking about here. And they all kind of look like this, right? They've got this FBQ track, and then they've got purchase or lead or whatever. You can pass additional details, like how much the sale was for, to your or to Facebook from your website, or you can just say that, let's track that a purchase happened on this page. Both of those are really helpful, and they provide a lot more context to Facebook. You can use standard events like this as conversion goals in your campaigns in Facebook, which is really, really nice. If you are using Shopify, I've got really good news. Shopify, once you connect your Facebook pixel up to it, will automatically generate those add to cart and sale events. So you don't have to go in and figure out how for your Shopify store you set it up to, fire this event off to Facebook whenever somebody adds to cart, or fire this event off to Facebook whenever somebody makes a purchase because Shopify natively does that integration, which is really awesome. And I also know that Zipify's one-click upsell, this is one of Ezra's things that he uses to improve Shopify. What's the word? Apps. One of his Shopify apps. And this one also includes the ability to automatically pass to Facebook data whenever someone adds to cart or buys an upsell. So a lot of that information, if you're an e-commerce store, is going to natively be pushed to Facebook. So you don't have to learn the ins and outs of it. The only time you're really going to need to use Google Tag Manager with your Facebook analytics tracking is when you want to track things like leads, or if you're selling products on a different platform, maybe Infusionsoft or something, then you are going to have to go back to Google Tag Manager, because Shopify obviously doesn't necessarily interact with you getting somebody's email address. It's primarily focused on the commerce piece, the actual sale and the products. So if you want to track other things, we do have to dip back into Google Tag Manager to send those Facebook events. And what we're going to do in Google Tag Manager, if you want to do that, is create tags like I talked about. So these are what happens when users take action on your site. So a standard lead event might look like this. It's a custom HTML, and you're tracking a lead. You've got whatever the name of the lead is, content category if you want it. I usually talk about, is it a business lead? Is it somebody interested in Facebook marketing or somebody interested in email? Just because it helps me pass more information to Facebook that I can then use to sort of sort and break it down. And then if your leads are worth anything, you can pass that along as well. Usually you don't do that for lead, but you would do that for a purchase. So one more thing to talk about on how to track. We hit the big three, which is going to be what we do in Ads Manager, setting up UTMs, what we do on our website, which is putting the Google Analytics code everywhere, and then potentially creating events using Google Tag Manager. And then what we do with Analytics, which is pass those standard events for Facebook purchases or leads into Facebook. There is another option. If you don't want to wade into the Google Tag Manager waters, you can use custom conversions to track sales or opt-ins in your Facebook account. And custom conversions are a totally legitimate option. They're really nice, and they're way more friendly if you're not necessarily a code junkie. If you're not comfortable getting around Google Tag Manager, you can use custom conversions, and they let you just use URLs on your website. So just like we were talking about with Tag Manager, those thank you page URLs, you can use the thank you page URL to say, okay, a purchase has happened here. And that's a really, kind of easy way for people that don't want to muck around in the JavaScript of their website to make sure that they're able to effectively say who's doing what on their website. The bummer or downside of custom conversions is you don't get the same kind of customer journey aspect that you do with standard events, right? Facebook doesn't know with a custom conversion if it's something people do early in their relationship with you, or something they do later in their relationship, or where it falls in the buying cycle. And it's also harder to kind of go back and retroactively look at those custom conversions in relation to each other. With Facebook Analytics, it's super cool because you can go back and say, like, okay, what did leads look like in the past? What did leads look like 60 days ago? Custom conversions, you're not going to be able to pass that information into Facebook Analytics as well. So if you're a little bit more tech savvy, I think using standard events is absolutely the right choice. If you are not tech savvy, not to worry. Custom conversions work in Facebook. They've worked in Facebook, for at least the last 8 years. And I know Molly often will make a custom conversion when she's getting started, and then if the campaign gets traction or whatever, and we like where it's going, then we might duplicate the campaign with with a standard event, so we can get a little bit more granular with the data in there, but it doesn't block her. So that is how we're tracking. Now let's talk about what we're tracking. And this is, I think, the thing people really wonder about. So you guys know a little bit about the marketing funnel, all right? We've already talked about the idea of cold traffic versus warm. And so we don't have to get too deep into this, but just thinking about this really quickly, there are more or less three stages of a marketing funnel. Awareness, when people learn that your company or brand exists. Evaluation, when they are looking at or considering buying your product. And conversion, when they actually go ahead and make that choice to buy. Well, as an analyst, we have essentially the same structure, but we add one more step to it. But so we've got the top of funnel. So that's the awareness stage, right? That's when people kind of learn that your business exists. The middle of funnel, this is when people maybe give you their email address, start to learn what products you have that are available. And then the bottom of funnel, where people actually make the purchase. And then we have the retention and monetization section, right? This is the circle at the bottom. And that's the idea that every time people buy, you want to keep them sort of in the family, keep selling them new things that they're interested in, that are a good fit for what they need. And the reason we're talking about the funnel structure, there is a reason, we didn't just totally change gears here, is because we need to make sure that we are thinking about metrics that affect each of these different stages. So the metrics that are relevant here at the top are going to be very, very different than the metrics are relevant when the customer is in the conversion stage, when they're ready to buy. You're not going to care as much about did they sign up for Messenger, when the question is more, hey, I'm showing them this $40 product, did they go ahead and purchase or not? So we want to make sure when we are tracking in our business that we're grouping metrics by the role they play in our sales funnel. By doing that, we can kind of think, okay, things that are happening here at the top of the funnel, those are all going to be the same campaigns. So you're going to know where to be working and what you're sort of looking at. And the audiences are very similar. The things we want them to do all are more or less the same. So let's kind of dive into different metrics for each of the sections of that funnel. So we'll start at the top of funnel. And the most important thing at the top of the funnel is on-platform engagement. So at the top of the funnel, it's before people necessarily click over to your website. This is where you want to kind of understand how they're doing stuff on Facebook's platform that shows that they're interested in you. So the two big metrics here are cost per video view. And to calculate cost per video view, we divide the spend on whatever campaign it is we're looking at by how many 3-second video views there were. And this gives you a rough sense of how much do I pay to get someone to watch 3 seconds of one of my videos. That's a really good metric to sort of start building that relationship with cold traffic. Video views are an awesome way to get a lot of reach, to introduce your products, your brands, all the stuff that you do on Facebook for very cheap. The other big metric here at the top of the platform is cost per messenger signup. To calculate that one, it's also pretty easy, right? It's spend divided by the number of messenger signups. And with both of these, we are just looking at how much money we're spending, obviously, but then these actions people are taking inside of Facebook, which is why we're talking about on-platform engagement here. And they give us a sense of how well are we using this sort of relationship in Facebook's court to bring people into the fold, right? To attract cold traffic to our business and our brand. Next, we have the middle of the funnel metrics. I don't have Molly here to to cover for me when I take a drink of water, but the middle of the funnel metrics. So our big goal at the middle of the funnel is to drive site visitors. So this is where we want to start getting clicks. People seeing our ads and choosing to visit whatever the destination associated with them is. So 3 big metrics at this stage, especially related to the click piece. That's going to be the click-through rate. So you calculate click-through rate by dividing the unique link clicks by impressions. So you're dividing the number of people, that's essentially what unique link clicks get us, by the number of times your ad was seen. So let's say you had 1,000 people saw your ad, and out of it, 25 people clicked your ad, right? That's pretty good. That's a 2.5% click-through rate, which is above average for most brands. That's a really helpful one because this one shows you how well your creative is driving people to want to learn more. Cost per click. So for this one, we're dividing spend, so how much we spent on this campaign, by the number of unique link clicks. And that gives us a sense of how much does it cost each time we drive a visitor to our website. Really, really important, especially when you're working with smaller budgets, to think about cost per click, because this is sort of the first measure of how much does it cost to get people to interact with me on Facebook. And then the last one that's really relevant here at the middle for this section is relevance score. So we don't know how this is calculated, and it's kind of an interesting one actually, because we know based on the news Facebook put out just yesterday that relevance score is no longer going to be a metric. Instead, it's getting broken up into 3 different metrics. So relevance score itself is not going to be important, but the 3 new metrics that are going to exist, which are looking at comments and likes, I don't remember the last one, but those will basically replace this. And they show us how well we are, building a positive relationship with people we are showing our ads to. It's super, super important, because the better the relationship you have with people on Facebook's platform, the more likely Facebook is to give you preferential display in the newsfeed. They want the customers to have a good, or the Facebook users to have a good experience, so they reward highly relevant ads, or whatever these new relevant score metrics are. The other thing that happens in the middle of the funnel that is not for every business, but is lead generation. So if you're more of an info products business or selling courses, then leads are a much bigger part of your landscape than they would be for people that are selling nail polish or whatever it might be. So there are some metrics we want to look at in those cases too, and that is cost per lead, which is spend divided by leads, and the lead form conversion rate. So cost per lead, that's still basically a metric you can look at in Facebook. You're dividing spend by the number of leads you generate. Lead form conversion rates, this is where we start looking at metrics from our website. So we would be wanting to say, we acquire 100 leads and we had 1,000 people visit the form where they are able to opt in. So that would be let's see, 100 out of 1,000, that would be a 10% conversion rate on the lead form. And this is really important, because once we start driving people to our website, we need to make sure we know how the website experience factors into their performance as well, right? Facebook is no longer the only element in play, it's also what's going on the site. And then we've got the bottom of the funnel. So this is where the conversions happen. And really what we're tracking here is how well we are generating conversions. So the metrics we want to look at are cost per acquisition. We divide the spend for our campaign by the number of customers it created, and revenue per visitor. Revenue per visitor is a really, really useful metric. You're basically dividing how much money you make by the number of unique link clicks that come from that campaign. And I've got a really handy little kind of trick or hack when you're trying to be smart about your spend that we'll get to later. But revenue per visitor is something I know not a lot of people look at. I definitely think it's worth your time to track, though. The other conversion tracking metrics we want to look at are return on investment. And I'm specifically talking about the immediate return on investment here. We get that by subtracting how much we spent on our ads from the revenue those ads generated, and then you divide that by the spend. And that shows you, if I'm going to spend $100 on Facebook and make $200, you end up with 100 divided by 100, and you get 1 or 100%. So basically you've made double what you made. Return on investment is, I think, the most important thing you can possibly look at when you are budget conscious, because this basically shows you, if I put $1 into Facebook, how many dollars am I going to get out? Am I going to get out 50 cents, meaning I've got a negative ROI? Or am I going to get more than $1, meaning I'm making money every time I buy ads? The other one, sales funnel performance. So I have a tracking sheet I'm going to give you guys where you'll be able to record sales funnel performance. But you basically want to track each step of your funnel. So people that visit the sales page or visit a product page, and then take an action, which would be either visiting the order form or adding a product to the cart. You want to show how well people move from one step to the other. By looking at sales funnel performance, you can dig in and see what's working really, really well on your site and what's not working that well on your site. Places where people are getting stuck, because then you can go in and improve what's going on your website and unstick those people. One good thing, or important thing I should say, to mention when we're talking about conversion metrics, Facebook can natively track ROAS, or return on ad spend. But ROAS and ROI are not the same metric. Return on ad spend is calculated by dividing revenue by spend. So when you get to 100% return on ad spend, you've made your money back. Return on investment, on the other hand, you're basically subtracting how much you've already invested in your advertising from your revenue. So a 0% ROI is break even. But you don't want to think, oh, I'm shooting for 0% with ROAS and Facebook, because you're going to lose money that way. I really think ROI is a better metric in general to look at performance for your business, because you're factoring in that cost up front, right? When you get to 100% ROAS, it looks and feels a bit like you're making money, right? You're positive, but really you've just made everything back. 0% ROI, I think, is more psychologically useful, because you actually understand, if I'm losing money on this ad campaign, I'm in the negative. And if I'm over 0%, that helps me understand my actual return. And then the metrics in the last section, retention and monetization. So our goal here, kind of once people have already become customers, is strategic growth. This is the opportunity to take people who have chosen to buy from your products and get them to buy again and again, and to keep following up with people who have made it through the funnel, maybe gotten cold. So here, I like to look at return on investment over time. So looking at the return on investment after 7 days and after 30 days. And what's totally different about this is if you have any emails that go out to people that just became buyers, or you have a follow-up system in place for your funnel. By looking at this return on investment over time, you're going to basically widen the range of time that you're including where people can be buying in a campaign. And it usually means that revenue goes up. But if you've got a product or service you're selling that takes a little bit of time to explain and talk through and get people to take an action, this is a really, really important way to look at and measure what's going on. Because if you only look at immediate return when you know it takes about 7 days to sell your product, you're going to never see a Facebook campaign that performs like you want it to. So stretching out the period of time you're looking at the return on investment is really helpful. And then lead and customer value over time. So looking at the average revenue you make by first opt-in or first purchase can give you this. So you've got some lead magnet on your site, and every time somebody opts in, you tag them in your CRM, your customer relationship management tool, like Infusionsoft. Once you've got that, you can look back over time and see how much money you make on average for people that get added to your CRM by taking that action. And when you know this, you can really smartly spend on the platform. Say you're selling a nail polish, and you sell the nail polish at basically break even, so $5 or whatever. If you look back after a year at everyone who bought that nail polish for $5, and you notice that on average people are worth $40, you know that you can spend quite a bit more on that campaign to acquire customers, because while you only make $5 up front, over time they end up spending another $35. That allows you to make strategic choices about how you want to go out and spend money. You can spend more money on the front because you know that over time those people will continue to buy, and you'll make that money back. So it's a great way to sort of scale up, right? Essentially spend more money than you're making in the short term, because the long-term value is there. So you want to choose performance metrics based on your campaign purpose. We just ran through a lot of different metrics, and I will definitely put the slides in the members area so you guys don't have to memorize all those. But when we're trying to think day-to-day tracking and performance, you want to make sure that you're not looking at every single one of those metrics for every single campaign you're running. Instead, you need to be choosing performance metrics that are related to what that campaign is supposed to do. So if that campaign is all about going out to cold traffic and getting interest and attention, looking at cost per video view is a great way to see how well you're building that interest and attention up. Or if that campaign is supposed to drive visitors to your website, looking at cost per click, and looking at click-through rate are the most important metrics you can look at there. So don't make the mistake of trying to, evaluate the performance of your conversion-focused campaign, right? This retargeting campaign whose job it is just to get people back to the cart. You don't necessarily need to worry very much about video views at that point if you're using video view creative. Sure, you could get some information out of that, but it's way more important to understand how well those are driving people to actually buy. That's the measuring stick we should be using to evaluate those. The other thing is it's time to start collecting. So I know kind of early on in this presentation I said when you're pulling data without a plan for it, you're not using your time well. And that is true, but having historical data to look at is really useful. And we know, or we're gonna know in just a minute, how we're gonna use all of these different metrics to evaluate what's going on in our business. So if you start collecting this information now, start, looking at what your cost per lead is and your cost per click is, even if you don't plan to start using that data tomorrow, you'll start building this repository of historical information for your campaigns, which is so powerful. You can go back and say, this campaign is starting to fatigue, it's starting to get tired, so it's time for me to add some new interest to it, or it's time for me to just turn this one off and start it over with a higher budget, whatever it might be. That was a water sip. That would have been great if Molly was here, but she is without power. So, all right. So just a quick recap. We've talked about why we track. We've talked about how we track. We've talked about the metrics that we track, right? The what we track. Let's finally talk about how we're going to use this information, right? So how you are going to use data in your business to be smart about your paid traffic campaigns. So I have a tracking sheet that you guys are all going to get access to. Since Facebook is dead, I'm not going to be able to show you filling any of it out today, but this tracking sheet is simple. It definitely is simple, but it's a really awesome tool to understand what's going on with your Facebook campaigns. This is something I still use today, right? When I first started a digital marketer, I created this to help us understand how Facebook was performing. And here we are 6 years later, and I still think this is one of the best things you can possibly be doing. Just going in and looking at each of your campaigns related to where they fall in your funnel, and looking at spend and looking at video views, clicks, this information. By using this and building this sort of historical record of what's going on, you are able to really make smart decisions about where to spend more, which campaigns to scale up, scale down, etc. So the tracking sheet is available at this URL, bit.ly/tmtp-tracking. Got to do all caps or it does not work. And I think we're going to have time at the end of this, so I won't be able to actually jump into Facebook itself and show you how to pull the data. We'll do that on Monday, but we might jump in and look at the tracking sheet. And I know you guys were super excited about what Russ had done, so I actually went and added a table for that to the sheet. So you can do some of that back of the napkin math with the sales funnels that you're running. So there's kind of just like the tool that we'll be using, but let's actually get into the how we're going to use this tracking information, right? So you've now got the place where you're going to store this. How do we want to use it? So the important thing is to think about the sort of funnels again, right? We want to think of, or funnel stages, excuse me. We want to think about these metrics, and they all are kind of grouped together. So cost per messenger sign up and cost per video view, those are going to be very similar in how we want to use those to make decisions in our business, because they have a similar impact on customers. They have a similar impact on people at that stage of sort of the buying journey. But I'm going to have the different metrics, and then I'll have suggestions for how to actually use that information. So first, we've got cost per video view, cost per messenger signup, click-through rate, and relevance score. So these are in platform. The data is pretty locked up by Facebook. So I definitely pull cost per video view and cost per messenger signup and click-through rate out when I'm looking at them. I don't always pull out relevance score. But it's a little bit harder to make huge strategic decisions with these because we can't get much supporting information, right? We only know what Facebook is telling us about these. But what we can do with these is use them to strategically experiment with creative. So all four of these really have a lot to do with customers' experience on the Facebook platform. You know, are the videos catching people's attention? Are people signing up for my messenger? Is my relevance score high, right? Am I targeting the right people with the right kind of ad creative on this platform? If you see that your cost per video view, cost per messenger sign up, click-through rate, or relevance score are lower than you want them to be, one of the best things you can start to do is testing different creative to see if you can improve any of these things. The best example kind of that illustrates it well is cost per video view, right? We want people to watch at least 3 seconds of our videos on Facebook. And we can do that by making the first 3 seconds more engaging. So if your cost per video view is really high, try tweaking your ad creative where the first 3 seconds of the video, you know, maybe you cut those 3 seconds off completely. Maybe you add something more engaging. Maybe you tell people to turn their sound on, whatever it might be. Doing something to make that first little bit more engaging, and then comparing your cost per video view metric that you had before you added that creative and after you added it will help you make smart choices. And this is where that incremental testing that I was talking about really, really comes into play. It's so, so important for you to be looking at, you know, each thing you change, where you add a new piece of creative, you change your targeting, whatever it might be, how that impacts overall performance in your numbers. Next, we have cost per lead and the lead form conversion rate. So one of the biggest things you can do here is identify ad sent issues. What this means is you've got stuff happening in the platform, right? Your ad maybe has a picture of a puppy dog. Well, I guess I guess Molly actually specifically said don't do that, but it's a reasonable example for this. So if your ad has a picture of a puppy dog, but then your landing page, the page on your website, only has pictures of cats, that's actually maybe not the best the best ad scent, right? At least a high level way to think about it. But AdSense is sort of that when people click off of Facebook to your website, how much or how little do they appreciate the experience? How well does what you're doing on your website reflect what your ad creative did? So if your lead form conversion is really bad, if your cost per lead is really high, one of the first things you can do is see, are people bouncing, right? Are they leaving your website right when they click over from Facebook? That's a sign that there's probably a mismatch between maybe your headline on your landing page and the creative that you've got on Facebook. You can also use this to analyze audiences that are converting well in Google Analytics to drive Facebook targeting. So looking at your lead form conversion in Google Analytics, you know, if you see, oh, you know, this audience or that audience is doing really, really well, to go ahead and opt in for whatever this lead magnet is that I've got, you can use that to drive targeting suggestions. Google Analytics has a section called Audience Insights that can tell you demographic information like age and gender. It can also tell you what people are interested in. You know, maybe they're interested in home decor, or they're interested in, you know, high-tech gadgets or jewelry. You can use that to come up with ideas for targeting on Facebook. And you can also use heat map tracking on opt-in pages to find opportunity areas. So this is a really, really high leverage one. And the reason I think it's so important to think about cost per lead, if this is something your business does, is because dropping your cost per lead basically means you can spend the same amount of money to get twice as many prospects to buy. So you're essentially doubling the value of your business when you do that. So using heat map tracking, something like Crazy Egg or Hotjar, you can find out what people are interacting with on your website and what people are not interacting with. And both of those are important. Things people do interact with, you know, try to draw more attention to them, make them bigger, or play those elements up on the page. Things that people are not interacting with, you can just remove from the page often. You know, maybe they're just slowing it down or making the page too bulky or confusing. It's also a good way to speed up your page by removing stuff. So next set of metrics, if we're looking at cost per acquisition, revenue per visitor, or return on investment, there are a few different things we do when those metrics are really good or really bad. So you want to go and evaluate funnel performance. If you're trying to improve cost per acquisition, revenue per visitor, ROI, the funnel is key. It's not all about Facebook ads at this point because there's so much of the experience that's happening on your website. So if you want to make any of those metrics get better, finding out how to improve the funnel, right? I talked about funnel steps. Maybe people are getting stuck at the add to cart step because the button is hard to find on the product page you're driving people to. Or maybe people are not, buying your upsell because there's a technology issue that's breaking it. If you look at the steps where you're sort of seeing how many people made it to this point, adding to cart or seeing the upsell, and then how many people step past it, so how many people actually go to checkout, how many people buy the upsell, you can find out where those sticky spots are and improve those. That's like where you know to focus your efforts. These are also influenced by your offer. So offer is not the product itself, but it's how we're pitching or positioning our offer. So maybe you're giving out free shipping, maybe you're, giving some discount on the price if people act now. Going in and looking at your offer is really important when you're trying to improve your return, because this is sort of the psychological piece behind the product itself, right? An offer is a product plus a way to sell it or a way to make people interested in buying. Maybe it's a scarcity aspect, So when we're looking at improving any of these three metrics, you have to really step away from the Facebook platform itself and try to think about the more strategic marketing side of your business. Then we've got sales funnel performance. So, this is sort of an aspect of looking at those other three, but it deserves its own conversation. Putting heat maps on key pages. We talked about this a little bit. If people are getting stuck on your sales page, find out what's working on that sales page and what's not. Are there broken buttons people are not able to click on? That kind of stuff. And then again, looking at conversion rates by stages. We already talked about that a little bit, but this is so important. And once you really, I guess I should say we've talked mostly so far in this course about the Facebook ads piece of it, but if you're not looking at your funnel, if you're not optimizing the process of going from being a site visitor to a buyer, you're never ever going to be able to get the return you want to see on Facebook, because the whole thing, works together as one big system when we're trying to get people to buy. What we do on Facebook is just as important as what we do on our website. And then the last kind of section, lead and customer value over time. I have to give this caveat, this warning. Don't do this if you're totally brand new to paid traffic, because sometimes it doesn't work that well, and it carries a lot of risk. But if you feel confident and comfortable in your numbers, this is a really, really awesome thing you can do. So strategically buying traffic at a negative ROI for greater scale with acquisition. So this is kind of what I was talking about with that nail polish example. If you know that you can get people to buy nail polish for $5, and you can really scale that offer up, and you know that after a year those nail polish buyers are worth about $40, you can theoretically spend $35 to acquire a nail polish buyer and still come out profitable at the end. So going out and saying, like, I know what people are going to be worth over time, and I'm going to use that to decide how much I can spend to acquire someone today, is a really, really powerful strategy. Here's a couple of kind of hacks, simple ideas that make tracking hopefully a little bit easier to sort of think through. First one, you're good when your cost per click is less than or equal to your revenue per visitor. So once you get to these metrics being equal, or where your revenue per visitor is higher, you basically have a winning campaign on your hands. There's all kinds of other aspects, obviously, but you're essentially showing that every time somebody clicks, they become a visitor, right? So it costs $1 for someone to click on the ad. And if you make $1 every time someone visits your site, you can do that ad infinitum, right? You can basically do that until the cows come home, and you're going to at least break even, if not start to make money. So keeping these two balanced, really, really great way to do a quick health check of your Facebook campaigns, especially purchase-focused ones. Combining spend across related campaigns to better understand ROI. So this is a really, really important idea. And again, I would say this one is a little bit more advanced, but it's useful. So when we think about our traffic system, right, the traffic plan that we built in session 2, I think it was, there were multiple steps, all working towards this end of getting people to buy something. And often we have a campaign on Facebook that's designed to sell a product, but we also have a retargeting campaign, right? People that add to cart but don't buy, we're sending ads to them on Facebook saying, hey, you put this in your cart, but you didn't purchase, just wanted to remind you about it. If you look at these two campaigns together, kind of combine their spend and combine the revenue that they generate, it can help you better understand your return on investment. A retargeting campaign for people who add to cart but don't buy is always going to have super, super high ROI, return on investment, because it's basically targeting the most excited, most active people who have not become buyers. The campaign that comes before that, that sends people to the sales page, let's say, often will not have as good of a ROI, won't make as much money. But the retargeting campaign, sending people back to the cart, that one couldn't work without that first campaign driving people to the sales page. So these two have kind of a mutualistic relationship, right? And if you want to make better decisions and think smarter about your spending by looking at these two things together, you can understand ROI in a better way, because neither of those campaigns can really exist without the other. The sales campaign may not make as much money, and the retargeting campaign can't get people in it unless you've got a paid traffic campaign feeding it. And then my last little hack or trick, this doesn't work for everybody. Facebook has wishy-washied on this a lot, but there are custom audiences in Facebook, and something that I really, really love to do that I think is super useful is to build more or less a quote unquote funnel with those custom audiences. So you can see in this example, this is from when we were working at Digital Marketer that I set this up. And I have a blog post that I'll show you guys, or that you guys can get to after this if you want to read more about it. But we were running something called the Facebook Ad Templates offer, and I had each step of that offer tracked here. So, people that read a blog post about Facebook traffic on our site, and that was 41,000 people. And then people that visited the lead magnet page but didn't opt in, 27,000 people. People that opted in but didn't add the product on the thank you page to cart, 21,000. People that did add to cart but didn't buy, 3,400 people. So we can use this to see how well we push people from one step to the next in our Facebook ecosystem. And you can find opportunity areas, right? There's a huge drop off between people people opting in for something and not adding to cart to putting it in the cart. So running a campaign to push more people to the cart who had seen this page would be a great opportunity. And the number of people that bought, we only got 9% of visitors to buy. So, adding more campaigns here would be a great opportunity to push more people. So building these funnels with custom audiences, this blog post right here, I walk through how to do all of that technically in Facebook. I think it's a really cool concept, and if you have enough traffic, it's definitely something you should consider doing. If you're only spending $500 a day or so on your Facebook campaigns, that's actually not a small amount of money, but if you're only spending $500 a week or $500 a month, you probably are not getting enough volume to do this. But if you're spending a little bit more money, that's a really great tool you can use to find, high value, high opportunity retargeting campaigns on Facebook. So we've made it through sort of how we use those metrics to make decisions. We're at our, I think second to last section, how media buyer analysts work. So this is thinking a little bit about what it means to be an analyst for a media buyer. What are the responsibilities? What are the roles? What do you do day to day? So things that an analyst will do: looking at the funnel performance tracking, giving you campaign red light, yellow light, green light. So basically that means they go through and look at all of the campaigns that are running, and they will give the media buyer a red light, turn this campaign off, yellow light, this campaign, could use some work, but leave it running. Or green light, this campaign looks great. Like, how do we scale it up? Those are just like really simple, boiled down ways to think about campaign performance. And an analyst can use all the metrics they're looking at to give more or less, full stop, proceed with caution, or all full steam ahead. Analysts work on long-term lead and customer valuation. So something that I really believe every person needs to know about their business is, what is a customer worth over time? What is a lead worth over time? Having an analyst is a great way to get that information, right? Because their job is basically to look at over time how all of these customers go from a single buyer to a multi-buyer. What are people worth when they join your system over a year, over 5 years? Analysts are also supposed to do campaign tracking Q&A. So they go through and look at your Facebook ads and make sure that everything has a UTM parameter. You definitely want to do this before launching. Nothing is more painful than realizing that there's no tracking on a campaign that's performing well out of the gate. So I definitely recommend having a analyst review, having an analyst do a QA on your campaigns to make sure that things look good. Analysts also do deep dive metric reviews. So when you're not just looking at sort of those surface metrics and you want to understand the big picture of the business, analysts are supposed to go in and look at that. Filter Google Analytics traffic to look at Facebook specifically. So when you are the analyst, or when you're working with an analyst, having them go into Google Analytics and looking at funnel performance for Facebook, right, excluding whatever's going on with your email, whatever's going on elsewhere, is a really powerful and important step. You want to make sure that the analyst, whether it's you or someone else in your team, understands not just how the general population performs when they're on some part of your website, but how the Facebook visitors do that as well. You also have your analysts do weekly check-ins for proven campaigns and daily check-ins for new campaigns and launches. So, there's all different kinds of ways we slice up campaigns, right? They're targeting cold traffic or warm traffic. They're targeting, this or that or the other. Another way to think about it that's really important for analysts is sort of the how proven is a campaign, right? Is this something we've been running for 6 months? Well, if it's something like that that's been running for 6 months and has worked pretty well over that time, it's kind of running on autopilot. You want to make sure you still do health checks to know that stuff looks good, but you don't need to be looking at it in depth every day. On the other hand, for something new or during a launch, right, something you're only doing for a couple of weeks, or like Russ's webinar, right, 1 week, you want to be checking in every single day as an analyst, making sure that you know what's going on, because it's a finite period of time for a launch, or because the new campaign, you sort of make or break its life early on. And I know Molly says wait 3 days. As an analyst, I usually like to look a little bit beforehand, but I don't give her the bad news unless things look really, really terrible until we're about 3 days in. So kind of analyst responsibilities, what does a routine look like? So you can do this on a daily or a weekly basis. I do this, kind of a big task that I do. So I usually look daily at this, but if you're the analyst in your business doing this weekly, that's good enough as well. So doing the red, yellow, green for active campaigns, right? Just going in, looking at those metrics and deciding how things look. Pulling funnel performance numbers. So that's actually diving in and grabbing the information on the funnel and passing that into your tracking sheet that we're going to talk about. Identifying areas for deeper review. So when you pull these funnel performance metrics, when you're looking at your campaigns, you might see something that sticks out as either really, really good or really, really bad. And you need to go in and, try to fix that, try to improve that. So flagging that as something that needs a deep dive. And then actually doing the deep dive, right? Actually going in and saying like, this stage of the funnel seems like people are really getting stuck. How do we make that better? What can we do about that? So you may be your own analyst, and that's okay. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. Not a lot of people have sort of that dedicated resource or the money to have an analyst in their business, and that's not a bad thing. When you're an agency owner, I think being the agency, especially like agencies that are just starting up, you may not know how to or you may not have the resources to have anyone else. You might be a one-man band or one-woman band. And being your own analyst is fine. You just want to make sure that you carve out time in your schedule to do the analytical work. It may not be your top priority, but if you don't go in and look at what's going on with your data, you are going to miss out on a lot of opportunity in your business. Or even worse, you might spend more money than you can on a campaign that's not working that well. So that is all we have for slides, but I want to go back and take you guys through this worksheet a little bit. So let me stop sharing my screen and jump back to the tracking sheet. So here we go, campaign performance. So share. Cool. All right, so you guys can now see this tracking sheet. And if you want to use this, and I really think you should, all you need to do is go to File, make a copy, and that'll add a copy of this to your own Google Drive. Or if you're not a Google Drive person, you can download this as a Microsoft Excel document. I don't know if that does anything funny to the formatting, it might, but typically this works pretty well. So I think that's a good option. But you can see here on this tracking sheet, we have campaigns broken up, just like I was talking about, in the different roles that they play. So we have awareness campaigns. These are ones focused on cold or traffic stuff happening in platform. So getting video views and getting messenger signups. We have engagement campaigns. These are campaigns that more or less describe the bulk of what we've talked about so far in Train My Traffic Person, in my opinion. They're ones that exist on Facebook, but their job is to drive people to your website. So we'll be mostly working here. And then there's conversion campaign tracking. So this is where you might have your really sales focused stuff, right? Things that are retargeting people back to the cart would fall into that category, or a campaign that exists only to make a sale happen. And these different fields represent sort of the total amount for that campaign over its lifetime. So in this, you would put, so far in the 6 months of this campaign's lifespan, we've spent $100,204. We've gotten, 1,000 or 106,000 views. So that would actually be really, really expensive for a 3-second video view. I just put some dummy data in here for you guys to see this, since we weren't able to actually pull it out of Facebook. But I use this to track the lifetime, right? You want to go in here and stick in how much you spent overall on that campaign, how much you spent overall, or how many impressions overall you've gotten. But I also really think it's valuable to track what's happening over time. So all of these metrics here are calculated, or not total clicks, but you don't have to enter anything specific to get these into the sheet. The one exception here in the conversion one is revenue. But looking at these metrics over time is really, really useful. So we also have in here this campaign performance trends. And so what I do when I'm using this with a client is every week usually I'll come in and put this value into whatever the value is, right? So for this week, we say the cost per video view is 94 cents for campaign 1, $1.16 for campaign 2. But the nice part about this is, 6 months down the road, right, we come back and look at this and we can say, hey, the cost per video view has steadily dropped on campaign 1. So some change we made with the creative has been really, really beneficial. Or unfortunately, more often you'll see things like your cost per lead or your cost per click increase over time as a campaign starts to fatigue and get old. But by tracking that metric, week over week, basically, you're able to go in and say, oh, wow, okay, this campaign is holding really steady. We're 6 months in, but the cost per click has only increased, from $1.10 to $1.20. So we can leave that one running. Or, oh, it's jumped too much in the last month, so we're going to turn this one off and try some new targeting. So going into the campaign performance, and each week when you drop new data in here, copying and pasting that into your campaign performance trend sheet is a really good strategy. And you just say, so 11, 6, 18, or if we jump to the present day, you might say this is 3/11/19, and this is 3/18/19. Getting into that practice of doing that tracking. I also have in here two different funnel performance tracking sheets. So I talked a good bit, I know, in today's presentation about tracking your funnel performance, right? So understanding when people get to your website, how many people are adding to cart, how many people are going in and actually buying, how many people are buying the upsell. And these sheets are where you can record that information. And they're set up to work on a daily or a weekly basis, whatever suits you better, right? If you're your own analyst, doing this every week works fine. If you have an analyst dedicated, then doing this every day is a good idea. But they can pull in each day, go and look at yesterday's performance, and they can see we spent this much on this campaign, the page that it was driving people to, 1,044 visitors, how many people got to the cart, order form. And this is where you're going to pull in those either unique page views if you're doing the more simplified setup, or you can pull in events, right? So add to cart events and order form, people that visit the checkout page, actual purchases and upsell purchases. So you can, in this sheet, really get granular and dive in and understand how people are using the different sales funnels on your site. There's one here that is more for info product businesses. And this one's nice because it pulls in your pricing automatically, right? Because we know that often with a core product, the tripwire product, or whatever the first product people buy, is going to cost the same amount. The upsell products usually cost the same amount. That doesn't work very well with e-commerce because people are looking at so many more products, so you can't make as many. You can't be 100% sure by just extrapolating out the number of people that buy what the value is. So you really do have to look at your system for that information. And we'll walk through a real life example of this on Monday. But the last thing I wanted to show you guys was the back of the napkin thing. So this is what Russ had done. And I just duplicated what he did more or less here. So everything that's highlighted in green is something that you can change. But what we can do with this is really calculate how likely we are to make money or lose money when we start running traffic. So the one big change I made is Russ, he was deciding how much he wanted to spend based on wanting to get 500 leads. But I feel like usually with media buying, you know what your budget is. You don't necessarily start from the count of leads you want and work backwards. You instead say, I've got $2,000 to spend on this campaign. So in this case, we say, okay, we're going to spend $2,000 on the campaign, and maybe we're 3 days in, and the cost per lead is looking like $4.25 each. So we would put that in here. That allows us to extrapolate out. Once we spent our full $2,000 budget, we can go in and say what our gross profit is. So, if we only have a conversion rate of 1.1, then we're going to lose quite a bit of money on this campaign. But if we have a conversion rate of 2% here, we'll make $500. We'll slightly better than break even on this. So you can go in and tweak this really easily, and it's good to kind of keep updating it as things change, to make sure that you're not losing out here on anything. So you guys can grab all of these tools, these resources. Yeah, so I'm gonna real quick look at the questions. I'm sorry, I'm not so good at the multitasking, so you guys might have been asking me a few things. Oh, good. Well, thank you so much for all the nice feedback. Make the text bigger. So I can zoom this in for you guys, yes. And again, I know we didn't get a chance to really dive into it today because we're already at 4:30, but we will dive into this, and I'll show you guys for one of the campaigns I'm running with Molly to actually sell the membership product we're working on together. We'll look at tracking for the campaign we're running for that, which will be really, really cool. So let me drop the bit.ly into the chat for you guys, and I'll see if there's any questions that we need to talk about real quick, and then we can wrap in the next 5 or so minutes, I think, if that sounds good to you guys. But I want to make sure I get you this link, since I know not everyone's going to be able to see it if we put it in Facebook. So drop a link, funnel custom audiences. So Aiden asked about heat map tracking. He said, how can we analyze more heat map tracking? Well, Aiden, I don't have a good one handy, but what I'm going to do is I'll make a note right now for myself, and I will bring to our Monday call a heat map from a company that Molly and I worked on, and I'll show you some of the ideas that we came up with by looking at that. So just because I don't have anything downloaded to show you guys, unfortunately. Yeah, so hopefully that was helpful. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to ask me in the group. I know this was a tough one with my stupid puppy dog barking. Hopefully that was not messing the audio up too much. I I could hear him, but I tried to shield the mic from his sound. And I know we lost Molly, but all that being said, we will be back on Monday next week. We will be in the Facebook group whenever, God willing, Facebook is back up and running. Oh, and one last question. Eric said, do you recommend using a dashboard like Google Data Studio? So Eric, that is what I use to do all of my personal tracking. I think it's really, really awesome. It's very complicated to use. I did an entire workshop on it for Digital Marketer, which was like a 7-hour day. And we got through a single page dashboard. We got it set up. So it's great. It's something I would love for you guys to use, but it's going to take a little bit of practice and training to do. So I might shoot a little video just because I think Data Studio is cool. If you're interested, Eric, I know Tim was also interested to give you guys kind of a rough introduction to that. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I really appreciate your time. I hope this was helpful and educational. And I know Monday is going to be really fun because we'll be able to really dig in and talk about any weird questions you have. I know everyone's got a different tech stack. So if you have any tech questions about tracking, bring those. I mean, I do a lot of tech stack stuff. I've migrated businesses. I've set up businesses in tech stack so I can answer questions about that. And we can actually see how these tracking sheets work when we have Facebook up again. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'll see you in the Facebook group.